The hot topic in the streets has been the finance bill. And you citizens did not let it slide this time. You went ahead to reach out to your MPs, asking them to reject the finance bill. But now most of us are aware of the finance bill only, but viewers understand that the finance bill is just an aspect, just one aspect of the whole national budget process. Just one aspect of the government's raising revenue measure. I mean, there's a whole process. There's the budget cycle, there's the terminologies around it, there's the formulation, so many things around it. And today I'm glad to be joined by a public finance, I just don't say practitioner, but I say also enthusiast around budget formation. I introduce Eve Mathai. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you today, finally.
Thank you for having me.
And you're looking...
Thank you,
I
you
should
too.
say. Thank you so much for coming today. Now, this topic around the national budget formation, and we start from, how was your day yesterday?
First and foremost, if I can give a more detailed introduction about myself. My name is Eve Mathai, and I'm a public finance practitioner, as you said. I work for an organization called SIDAREC, and I'm also an implementing partner with the International Budget Partnership as the Nairobi and Eastern and Central Regional Budget Hub, also called NEC. So it's a regional budget hub that facilitates budget advocacy in 13 counties. There are 3 other regional hubs across the country. The 5th one is still under construction because the facilitators are currently in training. So by the end of the year, we'll have 5 regional budget hubs covering 47 counties. I also curate a platform called Budget Talk Global, which essentially breaks down the tough budget terminologies and also disseminates important information to the public through social media platforms and also in formats such as animations, small documentaries, and film.
So if anyone wants to follow you in your social media platform?
So personally, mine is at MS Mathai, Miss Mathai. And for Budget Talk Global, it's at Budget Talk Global on all social platforms.
I've seen it on X.
Yes.
All right. Karibu sana, and we're excited for this conversation. And we're going to start right away from, of course, we know the finance bill, but as I've said, it's just one aspect of the national budget. Now, the national budget was read out yesterday, but we want to understand, how is the national budget formulated?
So the budget process is a continuous process. It's not an event like most Kenyans think of it. So it begins around July. So in July... Every year. So in July, the ministries, departments and agencies come together with the National Treasury to form sector working groups. It begins from there. So this process involves the sector working groups deliberating on the sector performance for the previous financial year.
What when you say sector performance, because my viewers they want to follow through and they might not be experts in this term. So when you say sector working groups, what do you mean?
Okay, there are several sectors under the national government, right? There's Ministry of Health, there's education sector, there's social protection and all that. So within those particular sectors, they form a committee of some sort, which is the sector working group, to deliberate on the needs and the priorities for that particular sector. So now that sector budget proposal from the sector working group, let's say for education, will submit their sector budget proposals to the National Treasury. So National Treasury does not make these documents on their own. They do it through consultation, through the sector working group. So it's like an organized forum for members of the different sectors to come together and give their priorities, put them together into a budget. Then from there, they look at the sector performance when they are drafting the sector budget proposals. So they look at how did the particular sector, for instance, health, how did it perform in the previous financial year? So they look at absorption rate. Absorption rate is the utilization of the budget, the particular sector budget. You'll find sometimes there are some sectors which lack the capacity to utilize the entire budget. And there are so many reasons that can cause this. One of them is late disbursement of funds from the national government. You know, most that's for county on county level. So when the national government disburses money at the last quarter of a financial year, it kind of cripples county governments from being able to utilize all the resources allocated to them within the financial year. You see, so those are some of the challenges that can come about that can make a county, for instance, not be able to expend its budget. Then after they come together and review the sector performance, they
That's
also...
the National Treasury.
This is now the national... We've gone back to the national government. So after the sector working groups have reviewed their previous performance for the previous financial year, they establish their needs and priorities for the incoming year. What are the budget requirements for our sector? So at that point, they include stakeholders in their field. They call the experts to come and assist them, and they panel beat the budget proposal, and then they start the drafting. So this is one process happening, while there's another process happening at the same time. So in October, the National Treasury starts the preparation for the budget policy statement. So the budget policy statement is a policy document that stipulates revenue-raising measures on one side. That is where the finance bill comes in. And then on the other side, the expenditure side of things. Yes. Currently, we are focusing a lot on the finance bill because it is greatly affecting Kenyans in terms of an increase in taxation, which means a decrease in disposable income for every Kenyan. So if you are earning around 20,000 shillings, and taxes are increased by about 5,000 shillings, you see it's going to reduce your disposable income, so you'll not be able to afford more things compared to a while back. So from there, when the budget policy statement is being formulated between January and February, now it is taken to public participation and tabled in Parliament, the budget policy statement.
Okay, sorry to cut. You said the budget policy statement is formulated in October.
Yes.
So where does January and February come?
Okay. Now you remember the budget proposals from the sector working groups.
Okay.
National Treasury has to incorporate that. That's why the process takes from October to January, February.
Okay.
It takes a long time. You can imagine 10 sectors submitting their budget proposals. Going through all that takes a significant amount of time. So by January, February is when they'll table the budget policy statement to Parliament. And then around March, the National Treasury, they finalize on the budget estimates. So now the budget policy statement influences the budget estimates. So you see, it's like a proposal, and then now finally they put the proposal into programs and sub-programs into the budget estimates. That's in March. Then between April and May, the finance bill comes into play. So it is presented and reviewed by Parliament. Then by 30th June, the budget is presented and assented to through a policy document called the Appropriation Act. This is also called the enacted budget.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there are so many terminologies.
There's so many, but we are following through.
Yes.
So what was read yesterday, is it the estimates?
Yes. Those are the budget estimates. But once they're approved by Parliament, they become the enacted budget. When the President assents to it, it's through a policy document called the Appropriation Act, which is basically the enacted budget. Okay. Now that one is the budget that we're going to use in the incoming financial year. Yes.
So the one that is read, when we see the CS of Treasury holding that bag, that is the approved budget.
So not
for that financial
year. It's approved when the President assents to it.
So when it's read with the suitcase, it's still a proposal.
There's still one last step, which is for the President to assent to it. Now it becomes enacted. It becomes a law.
Okay.
Yes. But by now, what was happening yesterday is basically what Treasury has recommended based on the feedback from the Budget and Appropriation Committee. And also, the Budget Appropriation Committee takes the budget documents to public participation. So they get feedback first from the public, then they go back to the drawing board evaluate the feedback, see what they can take, see what they won't take, give justifications for it, and then now they present it, they take it back to National Treasury. When the president comes in and signs it, it becomes the enacted budget. It's a very complex process, and there are very many people, key players, who are part of the formulation, part of the approval, and then finally part of implementation, which is the ministries, departments, and agencies. Yes.
Okay. So in a nutshell, can you give us that breakdown of the budget cycle? Where does it start from?
Okay. So first of all, I have to mention that budgets are about decisions. Decisions being made, and they're supposed to benefit the greater public, right? So the government is supposed to cushion the less privileged people in the community, and those are the special interest groups as stipulated in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. They include youth, women, persons with disability,
marginalized communities.
Exactly, marginalized communities, orphans and vulnerable children, and the elderly. So you see, when you start imposing all these taxes and not factoring the fact that recently the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics released some results saying that there are 19 people in Kenya living below the poverty line. That's a very serious case. 19 million people.
19 million.
Yes, living below the poverty line. So such data and statistics should be factored in during the preparation of the budget, or the expenditure side, in terms of executing or implementing austerity measures, that is cutting down on spending. You know, like, you don't have to start refurbishing offices at the expense of making available medication in health facilities. So, you know, it's weighing your options and seeing what to prioritize to ensure that people have quality access to services. Yeah, so basically after June 30th, when the budget has been assented to by the president, July 1st, you remember we start sector working groups in July.
Is that with the sector working groups, that's what we call budget formulation?
No. Yes and no. But with the stages, the different stages of the budget process include formulation, approval, implementation, and audit. And all these key budget stages have key players.
Okay.
So you'll find during the formulation stage, it's the National Assembly that is responsible. When it comes to approval, it goes to Parliament. When it comes to implementation stage, the ministries, departments, and agencies are responsible for implementing the budget. The audit stage, the key player there is the Auditor General, who is in charge of evaluating or analyzing whether the expenditures for the ministries, departments, and agencies are aligned with the planning and budgeting documents. So that whole period takes around 2.5 years. It doesn't take one financial year. Because currently we are implementing financial year 2023, 2024. We are formulating financial year 2024, 2025, and we are reviewing or auditing financial year 2022, 2023. So you can see the budget process takes place concurrently. You don't wait for one stage to be complete and move on to the next one. So one thing that I've realized while engaging with the public or participating personally in public participation forums is that the public stop engaging with this process after the approval stage. When it comes to implementation, Kenyans are not evaluating implementation reports. So both counties and national governments are supposed to submit implementation reports to the controller of budget for review. So the controller of budget does this in a quarterly manner. So after every quarter in a financial year, 1 month after, the law stipulates that the county governments or the national government should have published an implementation report. What is the importance of an implementation report? It shows you how counties or the national government are expending their budgets. So you can be able to tell within the second quarter how far has the health sector, for instance, implemented their budget. So we need to do it on a quarterly basis so that in case there is a challenge somewhere, we can be able to resolve it before the financial year ends. So one thing I would like to implore the public is to also look at those implementation reports, demand for them to be made public, because there are some counties which do not make this information public. So you can never know how projects are progressing within county level or national level. So it's important for them to be made available to the public, and the law demands for that. That is the Public Finance Management Act, as well as other laws like the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and the County Governments Act of 2015.
Mm-hmm. So the implementation reports are not public yet?
No, they are, but there are some counties which do not publish.
Okay.
There's a survey that the International Budget Partnership does. It's a scientific survey that is done by CSOs. So it's not an IBP-centric type of survey. It involves many CSOs from across the country. They are all from the regional hubs that I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation. So there are about 25 researchers, and then a couple of reviewers and senior reviewers who go through all the documents that have been already evaluated by the researchers. So it's called the County Budget Transparency Survey. I'm sure you have seen it in the past. For this year, Kwale came on top as number one because they were considered to be the most transparent county out of the 47 counties. And there are certain components we look at when we're doing this survey. One of them is timeliness. The law has provided timelines for when these budget documents should be made public. We also look at comprehensiveness. It's not enough that you have made these documents, you've published these documents. You also need to give us all the information, comprehensive information. And then we also look at availability. Currently, we're looking at timeliness for the next coming financial year. The process has already begun. So on county level, documents like the annual development plan were already assented to, they're already approved. So we check, have the county governments uploaded these documents online? So the survey is also continuous. We are following the budget cycle. So yes, some of the counties we realized are not adopting or indicating whether the information generated from the public participation forums are actually adopted into the approved and final documents. So it really undermines the spirit of public participation, because essentially public participation is there to ensure that the citizens' voice is heard. So if you do not incorporate it into the final documents, essentially it's meaningless. Yeah.
Now, with your experience and your years of work into this field, you have said that budget is about decisions. What determines the priority areas of budget? Because you've just made it known to us that it's the sector working groups that inform the treasury. But does the back end there, or what informs the priority areas in budget? Because it doesn't make sense for Kenyans, like you've said, going for refurbishment of offices and utilities instead of providing sanitary towels, healthcare, food. So what determines the areas of budget?
Okay.
Allocation.
Ideally, it should be the citizens. And also, sometimes emerging issues may come up. For instance, in 2020, financial year 2019-2020, when COVID was starting, it became apparent that we needed to put in measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. So it became a priority. Health had to get allocations, and this came in through a supplementary budget. So I need to explain what a supplementary budget is.
Yes, please.
So a supplementary budget is a budget that is drafted or prepared when there's an emerging issue, unforeseen expenses that come within the year, within the financial year. So this supplementary budget supersedes the approved budget. So let's say we've approved a budget, and then something comes up like COVID, and then we have to bring in a supplementary budget to increase allocation to the health sector. The budget that we are going to follow now is a supplementary one. We stop following the other enacted budget.
So is it an emergency budget somewhere? There's always allocation for that.
Okay, yes, that question always comes up. There's an emergency budget on county level and on national level as well. But
hiyo pesa haishikwi, imekaa tu mahali.
That, I think you're talking about the consolidated fund. or which one are you talking
No,
about?
supplementary.
No,
If
the
it's money, if it's
supplementary.
money for, if it's cash for emergencies, it means it has to be at standby somewhere.
Okay, on county level, there's money for emergency. There's an emergency fund, but it's not very clear as to how those resources are usually utilized. I'm still also trying to understand it. It's not very clear because just looking at the recent floods, why did we have to wait for so long to be able to offer assistance to the people that were affected? There's also an over-reliance on development partners or non-governmental organizations to come and assist in such cases. For instance, Red Cross. Just imagine if Red Cross was not in this country. Yeah, they are always very quick to respond to such emergencies. So it's become apparent that we need to actually start tracking emergency funds on county level and on national level.
So there's a difference between emergency funds and supplementary
Yes,
budgets.
there's a difference. Supplementary budget is an entirely new budget
Okay.
that serves to update the enacted budget because of emerging issues that may come about that we or unexpected or unforeseen expenses that may come about within a financial year.
Okay.
So there's a difference.
Right. Okay. So back to the question: how is the budget informed? Like
Okay.
areas of priority.
Yes. So ideally, it's supposed to be informed by the public. And that's why I was touching on supplementary budget.
Okay.
So we come together and deliberate upon the budget estimates. Then we give in our input and say this is what our priorities are. And then they're assented to into the enacted budget. A few months later comes a supplementary budget that does not go through public participation, which essentially changes everything that was decided upon in the enacted budget. So you see, it undermines the principles of public participation. The National Treasury last year, through engagement with IBP, really made some progress when it came to facilitating a public participation for a supplementary budget. It had never happened before. On the county level, this is unheard of. It has never happened. And following that financial year, it's also never happened on the national level. So one thing we keep engaging counties on is, because supplementary budgets are inevitable. You can't, there's no financial year which can take place without a supplementary budget. So since they're here to stay with us, why not also subject them to public participation, just as the national government did in the previous financial year? So we employ counties to also start doing that, so that they incorporate the mwananchi when it comes to making those decisions. So essentially, priority should come from the citizens.
From the citizens.
On the other hand, there's macro and microeconomic evaluations that the National Treasury does, things to do with inflation, exchange rate, just basically surveying the economic situation of the country. That also influences which areas we should prioritize in terms of budget allocation. Yeah.
All right. And now coming to the 2024 finance bill. You know, I've had people say that, you people only look at the finance bill, but you don't even know about the budget review outlook paper. It's an IDE. You don't know about the medium-term strategy plan. You don't know about so many other things. So a little bit about the finance bill.
Okay. First and foremost, let me explain a little bit about the documents you've just mentioned. The budget review and outlook paper is both, it looks at forecasts. It forecasts the expenditure for ministries, departments, and agencies, and also it reviews implementation or performance of those ministries, departments, and agencies. It's a very important document. It sets the precedents for the budget estimates. On the county level, we have the county fiscal strategy paper. It's the same as the county budget review and outlook paper. So the CFSP also sets like the sector ceilings. The sector ceilings for counties. For instance, it gives the resource envelope for a particular sector or department, if it's in the case of the county. So health will be allocated a certain amount of money, then it goes back to the department for them to be able to distribute the resources amongst the programs and the sub-programs. So you're just told, this is your budget, you retreat into your own space and then decide upon how you're going to spread around the resources. So that's the importance of those documents. There are many other documents like what you mentioned, the medium-term debt management strategy paper on the national level, and on the county level, it's the county debt management strategy paper. Essentially, these documents should be tabled at the same time as the budget estimates, because if you're going to plan or have proposals for how your expenses are going to look like, you need to know where the money is coming from. So that's why the finance bill and the budget estimates come around at the same time. In fact, this year they were late by 1 week, but they usually come at the same time. We can't start spending money if you don't know where it's going to come from. So the finance bill is a revenue-raising document. It stipulates revenue-raising measures and also amends taxes that are already in play. So since the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010, we've had several finance bills. You don't have to have one every year. So we started with 2013. We went to Finance Bill 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019, and then now from there, we've had a finance bill every year.
You said we don't have to have one every year.
No. So how a finance bill comes about is when the government realizes a new avenue for raising revenue.
For taxation.
Exactly. For instance,
it's been on the rise lately.
Exactly, quite a lot.
Okay.
So, for instance, in 2013, they started with an excise duty on mobile money transfer. In 2016, they introduced an excise duty on cosmetics. Cosmetics were not being
used.
Yes, they're not being taxed
days.
in the previous financial years.
Okay.
So they realized, hey, there's a market here.
Okay.
More Kenyans are buying beauty products. We can tax them to get more money. So you see the way they keep on finding out new ways to raise the
emerging
issues.
With emerging basics or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And in 2019, they introduced the paper bag levy. Remember when we ceased utilizing the juala, the polythene paper, we started using the new types of paper bags. So they realized the paper bags are contributing to negative environmental factors. Okay. So to try and curb that, let's introduce a new tax. And that's the same thing that happens to products like alcohol and tobacco. They're affecting the youth in terms of making them less productive, you know. So why not tax? It's like a social evil. So let's tax it to reduce its attractiveness. And at the same time, raise revenue for those who still want to practice that, because you cannot completely ban some of these products. Okay. Yeah, so the finance bill, every finance bill seeks to, one, introduce new taxes, completely new taxes that have never been in play in the country, amend existing taxes. Amend existing taxes as well. So that's for better understanding of how they've come into play. But one thing is to note is that you don't have to necessarily have a finance bill every financial year, unless they want to introduce a new tax or amend an existing tax.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, Sava. Thank you for that, Sana, because that's new information. I'm glad to know, and I'm glad that viewers will get to hear that. And now, a bit into politics, because I know you are an expert, but siasa kidogo tuweke hapo katikati so that you can understand. So this finance bill is being publicly rejected. But from my end, I understand the government, like you've said, the government has to look for new areas to raise revenue as emerging trends occur, because in the past, we didn't have the digital economy. Right now, we have the digital economy. So we have to raise revenue from there. And just like you've said. And now, it's being publicly rejected. And then it's being politically affiliated. So what do you have to say about the 2024 finance bill? Are there areas that you feel we can amend here? And I understand we also have a 4 trillion budget to achieve. So how are you going about it? Or should we take it in, or should we amend areas, or how do we go about the Finance Bill 2024?
Okay.
considering public opinion and also government revenue measures?
Okay, according to the financial year 2024-2025 budget needs, the budget is at about 3.9 trillion. What we intend to raise is about 3.3 trillion. So you can see there's a deficit already. There's the issue of public debt. And I think public debt last year was at 8.9. Now this year it's at 9.4 trillion.
I think it's even more than 9.4 at this time.
Yes, by now it could be more. It could be more than 9.4. So you see the need that we need to raise resources to pay
debt,
public debt. That's on the national level. And on the county level, the same things are happening at the county level with the pending bills. I'll give you a good example for Nairobi County. In the last financial year, pending bills amounted to 90 billion.
Wow.
The available revenue for Nairobi County was at 19.85 trillion. And that's including equitable share from the national government and on-source revenue, as well as conditional grants that have been directed towards Nairobi County. So you can see the margin, 90 billion as your pending bills, 19.85 as the revenue available. You're not going to be able to meet paying the pending bills as well as providing services for Mwananchi. So the law says that the first charge, when you get your budget, when you make your budget and you get your disbursement from the national government, the first thing you should do is settle your debts. That should be the first charge.
Oh, that's the law?
That's the law.
Okay.
You should first pay your debt and then now you start offering services. But if that was to be effected, many Kenyans would suffer because there would be totally no access to services. Yes, exactly.
Salaries.
Now, where the government is going wrong is they've not put in measures. Until yesterday, I heard that they have set aside 10 billion for pending bills. Mark you, 632 billion is the amount for pending bills on the national level. So if you put 10, at what point will you finish paying all the public debt or the pending bills on the national level? It's going to be very strenuous. So I think it's something that the government should prioritize on because it's greatly affecting the economy. Yeah, people don't want to do business with government anymore. The pending bills go back to as early as 2005.
Wow.
So you can imagine someone has taken a loan to go and furnish a tender. And then government doesn't pay you from 2005. Some people have even ended their lives because banks came for them, took their property, destroyed their lives. So I think it's an issue that should be prioritized. They should put in measures. And the 10 billion that has been allocated in this budget is totally not enough. It will take a long period of time for them to be able to clear the 632. And remember, the new financial year is starting, so they'll still do business with the public. They'll put out tenders for people to supply to the government. So it's going to keep on increasing. So if they do not curb it now, we're going to get to a very dangerous place.
So finance bill tunakataa ama tukatai?
Hatuwezi kataa because at the end of the day, if you need services, the government must raise revenue. The issue I have with the finance bill is that it is not cushioning the less fortunate in the communities. One thing that we've seen in the budget estimates is that they have reduced allocation to critical sectors like social protection. This is where cash transfers are for the elderly, for the persons with disability, marginalized communities, and so forth. So when you reduce this aid that they entirely depend on, I mean, it will be very difficult for them to go by because they will not be able to take their children to schools. They will not be able to go or afford, like now they're introducing HIF, a new insurance scheme. They will not be able to pay those monthly payments to be able to access health facilities. So I think the government should reevaluate how they're allocating or prioritizing allocation for these critical sectors such as social protection, health, education. they should always be at the center of ensuring that the vulnerable persons of our community are well cushioned.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there a possibility that when the finance bill gets to Parliament, there are areas that can be reviewed and taxes reduced so that we don't have to hit the 4 trillion budget, but review those areas so that you can cushion those taxes for the middle and the lower class in Kenya?
Yes.
That's a possibility.
Yes, it's a possibility. Yesterday during the budget reading, I heard the cabinet secretary say that they are going to prioritize on austerity measures. So that includes transport.
Yeah.
Our legislators have really been touring both locally and globally. And most of these trainings are, those tourings are for trainings. So it's not necessarily bringing anything back to Kenya. It's an expense that you can do away with, basically. So if you can cut down on those tour and travel expenses.
Austerity measures.
Exactly. And also on, like development of facilities for the politicians, like accommodation and offices, furnishing these properties and all that. I think that money can be put into a more urgent priority like healthcare and education. So it's all about cutting down on the areas that we can do away with and prioritizing those that are very dear to the common mwananchi.
Now, they usually talk about that amount, like refurbishing the deputy president's office. You see 1 billion has been allocated. And when you ask them, they say it's only a drop in the ocean. But anyway, that's story for another day. Now, as we finish up, you can speak to the public and tell them, more Kenyans you've seen how there's been an uproar of wanting to be involved with the finance bill. So more Kenyans want to be involved in the budget formation and these processes. Where is the entry point for a Kenyan and a citizen to be involved? And is public participation, does it make any difference?
Okay. First, before we finish, there's still hope with the finance bill in terms of amending some of the proposals. And this is it's totally up to the members of parliament. You talked about how the public have come together and are really calling for their members of parliament to do better, to reject the finance bill, but it cannot be rejected. However, there's still an opportunity for them to amend those proposals, and that is going to take place next week on Tuesday. So we'll know then after they evaluate the report from the Budget and Appropriation Committee, and then now we'll know the things that will be left in the finance bill and those that will be done away with. Also, we are not the only ones doing our budget and our finance bill at this particular time. The East African community ascends to the same budget cycle. Uganda also had their budget reading yesterday, and Tanzania as well. They also had their budget reading. So I think one thing I'm keen on doing is also evaluating how our sister countries are going about budgeting and planning, just to compare and see where we are. So that's just by the way. Then you asked about how the public, how the public can get involved with the budget process.
And public participation generally.
Yes.
Does it make any difference?
Public participation is important, and it is enshrined in our legal framework. So the government recognizes that the public needs to be at the center of development of this document. So how can they get involved? One of the things that you can do, and I feel like it's still not effective, is visit the government websites. The county governments usually put out a call for public participation through the newspaper. But then again, it asks, you have to ask yourself, how effective is this? When was the last time you bought a newspaper?
I do buy papers.
You do? But you're not most Kenyans.
I'm not most Kenyans.
I'll be honest, I don't buy newspapers regularly because I can retrieve this information through
the
websites and social media platforms and so forth. So buying newspapers, I don't think it's the most effective way to relay this information to the public. I think there's a lot of underutilization of the word office, the ward administrators, one of their key responsibilities is to mobilize the public for public participation and also provide the relevant budget documents to the public in readiness for public participation.
So it's a role for the ward administrators
Yes.
to disseminate information.
Exactly. So I had this conversation with someone from the county government of Nairobi, the Department of Economic Planning, and they said this is something they will consider in the next public participation, printing those documents, because you can imagine one document can have 600 pages.
Exactly.
That is the County Integrated Development Plan. The planning document for Nairobi has that amount of pages. So you can imagine not everybody can be able to print with their own resources
Yes.
that huge document. So the ward administrator's office would serve as a good space to provide this information in terms of availing the documents on earlier before the public participation forum. Another thing that I think the government should improve on is civic education on the budget process. It's still wanting, although non-state actors like IBP, Budget Talk Global, CSOs mainly have been on the forefront of breaking down this budget information to make it more palatable to the public. So government should collaborate with non-state actors and civil society for more civic education. Makueni County is a very interesting county. They have gone to the extent of publishing their budget estimates in their vernacular language in Kamba.
Wow.
So you see, that one bridges the gap of the language barrier and not being able to understand these budget documents. Imagine if all counties would be accommodative like that. It will go a long way.
Information would be out there.
Exactly. We will stop and cease relying on our legislators to explain these documents to us, you know. So civic education should be aggressively conducted, and a collaboration between the CSOs who are experts in this field and quite independent, and government. They should come together and collaborate on that. Another way the public can get involved is by drafting memos. That is the only way you can guarantee or evaluate whether the input you gave during the public participation was actually considered in the final approved document. Most of the times we go for public participation or we deliver a memo, but we don't look at the approved document to see whether our sentiments were captured there. So I think that is very important as well. And then also joining platforms. I talked about the regional budget hubs.
Okay.
These are platforms that there's a lot of peer learning. You can learn. Our hub has 13 counties. So Nairobi budget champions can learn from budget champions from Nyandarua, for instance. So you see, there's a lot of learning and collective effort in terms of budget advocacy within the regional hubs. So I think the public can also check out the regional budget hubs and also be a part of them. We're very open. We like to have more people. We are sector focused. So for instance, we look at social protection, health and education as the Nairobi Eastern and Central Regional Budget Hub. The Coast Regional Budget Hub looks at water because water is an issue in the coastal counties. You see, so every region has its own challenges that are being addressed by this through advocacy within these regional budget hubs.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, those are the low-hanging fruits that the citizens can get themselves involved in.
All right. And what you're doing here also.
This too.
Yeah.
And also, I really like what you're doing.
Thank
and I
you
wish
so
more
much.
women would get involved in this.
Asante sana. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. And thank you so much, Eve. Keep this conversation flowing because this is not a one-time conversation. Let's keep it flowing on the socials. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't. Share, comment, and let's keep this conversation flowing. And until next time, see you.